It definitely gets dark. My second winter there, I got moved way up into the north, and I didn't see the sun for 3 months. And it definitely gets to you a little bit. And it sounds kind of ridiculous the first time. Like, oh, that's fine. Like, I could deal with that. So we had a teacher tell us about it and be like, oh, yeah, it really gets to you. It's like, nah, like, I'm pretty, just mentally stable. I could get through that. And you don't know how hard it is until you're there. And we got to see the Northern Lights too. I mean, that was really cool. Um, that's definitely a big thing up there. I've talked to a lot of people that's on their bucket list. Like, I want to see the Northern Lights, and yeah, they're there. We saw it like 3 or 4 times a week on average. Like during the middle of the day, you'd get that maybe like 3 or 4 hours of like sunset light, but you wouldn't actually see the sun. You'd know, okay, it's just barely below the horizon, but it wouldn't ever actually just peak up. So for a good, 3, 4 months, we didn't see it. It was, yeah, that's no exaggeration. It's not there. Even down in like the south areas like Oslo, because of the tall buildings, you'll go a couple days or weeks without seeing it, but still, like, it'll only get like about that high in the middle of the day, and then it'll go right back down again, and it'll be dark by like 3 or 4 o'clock. For the most part, everything that I had to do, like interactions with Norwegians, are very positive. They're very smart people. They're very just intellectual, critical thinkers, I'd say, is probably the best way to describe them. Other than that, like I said, they're very kind of, standoffish just a little bit, but it can be a very positive thing too. Like once you become friends with a Norwegian, they're the most open people in the world, and they're some of the most friendly people you can get out there too. For some odd reason, once you go out and once you hike, once you get into the mountains, they become the most open people in the world. Other than that, you get just very intelligent people. They're the best English speakers in the world amongst people who have English as a second language. Most of them you'd think they were native speakers. You almost literally can't tell a difference. And so that makes it kind of hard to really just kind of earn their respect with you learning Norwegian, because they went from Norwegian to English and they learn it almost perfectly. So when you're learning Norwegian, like, you have to get pretty good. Like, they'll say that they're impressed, but unless you really get it down, they're not going to be that impressed. I'd say it's definitely good. Really try to learn the language because it's an important thing to them. I don't know, they're just overall really cool people. I don't know, it very rarely happened that anyone was rude to us. I haven't heard a story of anyone, ever getting spit on or, getting cursed out or anything like that happening with Norwegians. They're very polite. I'd say it's a very rich country, and so they have pretty much whatever they want. A lot of people really just don't think about religion that much. I mean, they've had the state church, and I'd say most people are just, in name members of the state church, but they don't go that often. Like I said, they really just don't think about it that much unless you start asking them about it. If you start asking, like, well, what's the purpose of life? That's what really gets them thinking. They have a lot of strong family values. Most people, even though in Norway it's cheaper just to live with a girlfriend, a lot of people will still get married and have families and raise kids. Even though the society would say, that's not really happening, it happens a lot still. I think they value, just close family relationships and other things like that, just time spent with family and friends, a lot more than they value money and everything else. I'd say the people overall are just a lot quieter. I remember getting there and, people just talk very quiet. And when you're trying to learn a new language too, that's kind of hard, just because you're trying to pick out just the specific words in their sentences, and they're being very quiet. You have to listen very carefully, especially over the phone. That gets really hard because they're even quieter on the phone, and it's a little bit more fuzzy. And probably the most important clothing you'd probably want to buy in Norway itself. A lot of the jackets and everything, you're going to want it to be just kind of in the Norwegian style. And, as far as winter goes and everything there, they really do it a lot better in Norway. They make a lot better just, winter clothing over there. I think just overall they're very just environmentally aware. So you have a lot of people that actually, use the bus, you take the trains. Their train system's actually, very, very well developed. And so, yeah, whereas in the United States, you get on a bus and there's maybe like 2 other people on there with you. Whereas in Norway, you get on and throughout most of the day, it's packed. As far as work goes, they're morning people. I don't know how they do it, but compared to the US, where most jobs are 9 to 5, they go from 8 to like 3. And they usually only work 7-hour work days too. Like I said, they value more their free time and, spending time with their kids and with their families. So they take less money for just, more time off. Well, crime in Norway, it's almost non-existent. It's ridiculous how safe you feel pretty much everywhere. As far as housing goes, most people live in a lot smaller houses than, I don't know, their economic situations would say they can. I don't know, it's something with the way they value things. Like, they just don't need as much space as, we like to have in America. So they get along a lot better just in smaller areas. They like to be more so, just humble about their housing, I guess you could say. Like, they say, I don't need this much land. Like, we can live on a lot smaller. Like, more people could live next to us if we, don't take up so much space. And so they don't. And, I thought that was actually kind of cool that they were a little bit more, conservative in that way. They thought, we'll use less resources, we can get by on less, so, more people can have more. And it's something that's really helped their, country out a lot. There's a lot less poverty in Norway, just in general, too. The government takes care of everyone really well. As far as what you have people doing for work, you have a lot of I'd say a lot more common jobs. Like, you have a lot more people, just working in construction, working, fixing telephone wires, or doing just a lot of, I'd say, just, manual labor, as compared to the US, where it seems like everyone's working an office job. You have a lot less people, I'd say, working office jobs than you do in the United States. But that's the thing, they get paid a lot more in Norway too for doing manual labor and for doing everything else. Like, for instance, one of my friends from my last areas is coming over, to spend about a month vacation in the US, and he's working as a grocery store clerk. And he's making a ton of money doing that. And, he can afford to come to the United States for a month just off of his grocery store clerk salary. All my friends laugh at that. We thought, oh, let's just go work in Norway for the rest of our lives. It's great. They have a nice system over there just to try to help people to find jobs as well. Usually have a very large government building kind of in the downtown areas of each town that's dedicated to, helping people find jobs. Actually, there's one thing in general in Norway that's a little bit different than most places. Norway is becoming much more of a melting pot of just different cultures than it has been, traditionally, and a lot more than most European countries are now. Because a lot of people will, if they have problems in their own country, they'll flee to Norway. So we talk to a lot of people from, different countries in Africa, different places in the Middle East. A lot of people even too in the Eastern Bloc of Europe would just come to Norway because, things are better, or, a different conflict broke out and they had to leave their country for some reason. So we'd end up talking to a lot of people from, different countries in Africa and everything. I remember we got invited to play soccer, and we were just playing soccer with a bunch of these other people, who were refugees in Norway. And there were like 5 different languages going off, and, all sorts of different, try this. And I don't know, me and my companion just spoke English and Norwegian. We couldn't understand like the Italian, the different like Somali. Yeah, there were a couple guys from Somalia that were there, and it was just a very overall cultural experience. You get to experience a ton of different cultures in Norway. For the most part too, I taught a lot of people from the Middle East, and that's a very interesting culture to get into as well. I gained a lot of respect for them, and a lot of, I just feel a lot more cultured after talking to them, and I understand them a lot better. I have a lot more love for the people over there too as well. I'd say one of the main differences too is, and you'll notice this throughout a lot of the European school systems, is they specialize a lot sooner. You get to specialize in high school whether you want it. I remember there's like a sports line for, people who are either end up doing a lot of manual labor or just going to professional athletics. There's just kind of the general line if you keep going with, math, sciences, English, and everything else. That's one interesting thing. And like I said, you see that all over the place in Europe, is they specialize just right off the bat in high school. The summer in Norway is probably the most amazing thing ever. Mostly because you get the exact opposite of what you do in the winter, except it's really just, very nice warm conditions. They get up to maybe like the mid 80s, and that's a really hot day in Norway. Other than that, the sun's out all the time. And so, you're walking around in the middle of the street, you look down at your watch and, oh snap, we need to be home like right now. It's 9 o'clock and the sun's still up in the sky, and it's not going down for the next couple months. So, it's crazy. Everyone over there really loves the summer. People are always out, and they're always out doing something, figuring something out. It's just a very active time, I guess, in Norway. They struck oil a couple decades back, and that was the main thing. That really just got their economy moving. Once they got into the oil industry, just overall the government started making more money off of taxes, and yeah, the oil industry really just kind of pushed Norway into, pretty much now it's the best country to live in, as declared by the UN and several other places. So just having that, wealth of resources in a country where there's not a lot of people really just kind of lined it up, and it just kind of, made the perfect little lineup for Norway to, kind of shoot to the top, I guess you could say. Other than that, the way they manage their resources, they're very careful about that. Like, they're willing to spend just kind of out of their Norwegian values on different things like, helping the poor, helping kids get through public school, and, just making sure everyone has it, has a good time, and, is doing what they want to with life. Other than that, yeah, they constantly argue too over politics. I was surprised at, how big of a thing politics is elsewhere in the world, but that was just me kind of being an uneducated American. I was actually surprised, kind of. I'd hear people complain about, there's too much poverty in this country. I thought, oh, just look around you. It's all over the place everywhere else. If anything, this is where it's, at its best. There's almost no poverty here, but still it's, Norwegians just have that idea that, poverty is this terrible thing and they want it gone. And so, they were just blessed with that abundant resource that, they've struck oil and, it's all over the place up there. And they're just going to, use their money to make sure everyone in the country is, at their best and, pretty equal. They have this cultural thing. It's based off of something written in a Norwegian play. It's called Janteloven. And it's kind of this idea, like, it's more so just kind of like an ethical code of, you aren't really any better than anyone else. It's just, we're all really good. It's this idea of, you really should, hold yourself above anyone else. And, that was something that really surprised me about Norwegian culture, and something that I really liked was just, their respect for pretty much everyone around them. It's called fårikål, which means just lamb and cabbage. And it's in a nutshell what traditional Norwegian food is. It's really basic. It's just lamb. You cook it in cabbage for a really long time. You season it just a little bit with some peppercorns, and that's pretty much it. And I don't know, if you find the right people, they can do it really well, and it tastes really good. A lot of people have heard of lutefisk. It's kind of this really just dry fish that they've kept out for a long time, and it kind of has the texture of jelly. And everyone thinks it's the most disgusting thing. A couple people like it every once in a while. But there's this story that kind of describes, just Norwegian food and how they got all their traditions and everything. And no one really knows the complete story of how lutefisk was invented. But it has something to do with, oh yeah, they were sitting out and they were drying the fish and it got mixed with lye somehow. A lot of people say, oh, there was a fire or something. But in the end, it always comes down to, and they were too poor to just throw it out, so they ate it. And I guess that really just kind of describes the food of Norway just in general, or at least the traditional food, is just they were poor and they did the best with it that they could. So
I don't really know exactly what lye is.
Yeah, I think it's some kind of poison. Use it for either cleaning. It's pretty much just a cleaning product, or I don't know what it is, really, to be completely honest. But it's poisonous and it's not meant to be mixed with any kind of food, but for dried fish, for some reason, it works. So other than that, it's just very first world. They have supermarkets and everything over there, and they sell pretty much what we sell here. So, I mean, it was very rare that we got just a traditional Norwegian meal. Other than that, we were eating like tacos and salads. And there's pinnekjøtt, which is a kind of meat that they cook for a really long time as well. They're really big on just cooking everything for a long time. But it's mostly bone, and they eat a large part of the bone too. Mostly because, yet again, going back to that, they were poor and they didn't know what else to do with it, so they ate it. So, I don't know, but I've heard, if you salt it well and if you prepare it right, then it's very good. Other than that, during the summer, they really like to go out and grill things. So we got a lot of hot dogs over the summer. Other than that, they're really big into microwave pizzas too. Don't know why, but it exploded over there. They love it.
The different sections of Norway are very different from one another, like Eastern Norway versus Western Norway and Northern Norway, and they each have their own individual culture, it seems. If I were to take all of the cities and put them into one and describe them, I would say that it's very modern, up to date, very clean. I get a very big feeling that it's just very clean and orderly in Norway. Their transportation systems are excellent. For example, they have the Bybane, which is the city train in Bergen that goes through most of the city and to the church or to the main city or even to your apartment. That would just run right through town. Or for example, in Oslo, you have many different methods of transportation. You have the trikk, which is like the city tram, which is much like the Bergen Bybane. But you also have the subway. And then my favorite way to travel in Oslo was with the bysykler, which are the city bikes. And we could get anywhere the most quickly with those city bikes, where they have a certain station that you would use a card and unlock the bike to wherever you needed, and there'd be another station waiting there, and you would just lock your bike there. And it would register that you had taken your bike and then delivered it somewhere else, so you weren't stealing it. And a lot of people use that system, and it worked very, very well for us. Another thing about the cities is that they are generally quite small compared to New York or Los Angeles. I've heard Oslo described as the biggest small town you've ever been into. And it feels like that. It feels close and comfortable there. When it comes to crime and safety in Norway, it is one of the safest countries out there. Norwegians themselves believe very strongly against violence in general, and so you can be very severely prosecuted for performing any kind of violent act at all. They take it very, very seriously there. And I recall going and knocking on doors, and we'd just be walking around. It'd be probably 7:30 or 8 p.m. at night, and then we'd have just like a little girl just walking past, just playing in the snow by herself in the middle of the night. That would never happen in Southern California, where I'm from. And so it was a very big surprise to me just how safe it was in Norway. Norwegian houses are generally very colorful, and they're beautiful, and Norwegians like to take care of their homes and of their gardens. Generally for work, it really depends on where you are. So for example, in Western Norway, in the cities of Bergen and Stavanger, my favorite areas, they work on, what are they called? Oil rigs. They work on oil rigs. And so they'd be gone for 3 or 4 weeks and be home for 3 or 4 weeks, gone for 3 or 4 weeks, and so forth. And they do very well with that money. But on their 3 or 4 weeks off, they would take it, mountain biking, road biking, swimming, going camping with their family. And yeah, they have a very comfortable, enjoyable lifestyle. The Norwegian personality is very interesting compared to the American personality. They seem to be more to themselves and very reserved, but because of that, they have a very high level of respect for one another. I do recall trying to make friends with some Norwegians, and at first it would generally be difficult, but once I finally got over that, those Norwegian friends became some of the most trustworthy and honest and loyal friends that I have, even to today. They very much value their friends and their connections, and they do not want to mistake that or make any mistakes towards that person. And so they value their free time greatly, which I think is very valuable. They use their free time very wisely in spending it with friends and family and loved ones, where I typically see American personalities being the workaholics or focusing too much on this or that, but they tend to focus on those things that are most important to them. And their culture in general allows them to do that. Their work lifestyle is fairly relaxed, and so they take advantage of their vacations quite a bit, which is great. And I would be so surprised that they could still live their lifestyle and be gone for 3 to 6 weeks. But they'd go with their families and just have the best time of their lives wherever they were. Norwegians value honesty very highly, and respect of one another, which I found very refreshing. They don't tell you one thing and then mean another thing. They tell you how it is. And I very much appreciated that about their culture. Again, they strongly value peace, nonviolence, and being a very peaceful people. So much so that they have no guns allowed in the whole country. Even the policemen have to call their authorities in order to unlock their guns in their cars to use them for whatever reason. When it comes to holidays and traditions, okay, the biggest holidays in Norway are Easter and Christmas. And New Year's is pretty big too. If you think of an American 4th of July, that is a Norwegian New Year's. I can remember trying to go to bed on a New Year's night and the fireworks would be going constantly for hours and hours and hours. Luckily I had earplugs so I could sleep through it, but it'd bring back memories of 4th of July. Their New Year's would. Easter, they typically celebrate Easter for a whole entire week. They have a week off of school and work to go to their hytte, which is their cabin up in the mountains, where they would go as a family and go skiing and hiking and enjoy the sun that had just come up after the long dark winter. And they would normally have these candy bars during that time called Kvikk and they are the closest thing I can compare it to is an American Kit Kat bar. And whenever you open them, on the inside of the wrapper, they have hikes. And so you could explore the different hikes that they were telling you about in Norway. Another thing they would eat during Easter time would be a soda called Solo. And it's like an orange soda. I didn't like it very much personally, but everyone else loved it. Now Christmas is a very big deal there as well. They celebrate 2 days before Christmas, the day before Christmas, which is the big one, the day of Christmas, and then between Christmas and New Year's, all of this time is set apart for celebration. And so the 23rd of December is called Lille Julaften. Oh, nope, my mistake. That's not it. Lille Julaften. Yeah, that's true. Okay. Yeah, the 23rd of December is called Lille Julaften, which means Little Christmas Eve. And then Julaften is the 24th, which is Christmas Eve, and that is where the big celebration happens. And then Juledagen is the 25th. And so how Norwegians would generally celebrate their Christmas would be on the 24th, the big day. They would have a meal where lots of meat, dried, salty meat, and you would gather around the Christmas table, and you would be dressed in your very, very best. Men would wear a suit coat and a tie and a white shirt, and women would wear a very nice dress, generally old-fashioned, the traditional old-fashioned style of Norwegian dress, and is interesting experiencing a Christmas with a family that dressed up really nicely for their Christmas traditions. When you greet each other, you generally say hi hi or hi san. That generally means hey, or as a general greeting term. In English, we generally say how are you or how's it going very frequently, but Norwegians don't say that. If you say hvordan går det, which is, how are you, they generally tell you very honestly how they're doing, because they take the question literally. Americans tend to not do that. Norwegians joke that no matter how an American is doing, even if his leg is chopped off, if you ask him how's it going, he'll say I'm good. Other Norwegian phrases, takk means thanks. A very common way to say thank you is takk skal du ha, which translates to thanks shall you have. Goodbye is ha det bra, which literally translates to have it good, but it's your general goodbye. Some of my favorite Norwegian phrases is after a meal. Any meal with any Norwegian ever, you can say takk for maten, which means thanks for the food. And they always respond very warmly and pleasantly when you say takk for maten. So I primarily served in the west and the north in Norway. And I generally split up Norway as the west, north, and east. All over TV and radio, they speak Eastern Norwegian. And to describe Eastern Norwegian, it sounds very sing-songy, very light. If you've ever heard the Swedish Chef from the Muppets and how he goes do-do-do-do-do-do, it's a little bit like that. I generally tried to hold an Eastern dialect because since it's on TV and radio, everyone could understand me if I spoke that dialect. In the West, they have different words for things than, compared to the East. However, their pronunciation is the most difficult part. And so they take their R's and they scar them, meaning if you think of a German R, they have it back in their throat. They do that with all of their R's in the West. So that's something to get used to. Northern dialect has a special place in my heart. I served both winters up in the north, which was a difficult experience, but I have such warm feelings towards it. Northerners generally speak more slowly and more comfortably, it seems, but also it's more nasal. It's more forward in the nose. Like, for example, one of our favorite phrases from the north is "I come fra Buda," which means I come from Buddha, but it's a very nasally, somewhat Asian sounding dialect. Yeah, that's the north. Okay, so this is probably going to sound terrible because I know that all my Norwegian friends are going to be listening to this, and yeah, they're going to think that was a terrible Western dialect. I'll say, yeah, you're right. Okay, so I will say I come from Bergen in Norwegian, in the three dialects. Okay, so in the Eastern dialect, I would say Jeg kommer fra Bergen, which would be a total lie, because if you're from Bergen, you're very proud of your dialect. If you're actually from Bergen, you'd say Jeg kommer fra Bergen. I'll say that again, just in case. Jeg kommer fra Bergen. And then in the north, you would say Jeg kom fra Bergen. Jeg kom fra Bergen. That's close enough. Yeah. North dialect, they chop their words in half, it seems. It's a little lazier, for example. Like if I were to say Jeg kommer fra, which means I come from, that is the Eastern dialect. But in Northern dialect, they would just say Jeg kom fra instead of Jeg kommer fra. And there was a really old man in northern Norway that he would talk about, he had a very thick fisherman's dialect. Sweetest man in the world. He was so nice. But he would talk about, ja, det var vinteren i 99, og vi hadde, det var 27 grader, og vi hadde 7 meter snø. He would just talk about how cold it was and the snow and the terrible fish prices. I love talking to that old man. Anyway.
Norway is a very rich country. There's virtually zero poverty there. You'll hardly ever see homeless people. If the people don't have a home, basically the government will get them in a home and help them out until they can get a job and working. So some of the poor people have it better than the people in the U.S., like the middle class people in the U.S. But in Norway, there's a huge middle class of people, and there's very few rich or poor people. They just have enormous middle class where everyone's about the same because of all the taxes that they have in Norway, there's an enormous, especially if you're in the larger cities, there's an enormous amount of refugees from other countries, mostly African countries. I've met someone from almost every country in Africa at some point while I was there. But they just live there, and they'll help them find jobs in Norway and help them learn the language and everything like that. And you'll meet them everywhere, and they're all super nice. Daily life, public transportation is huge there. Everyone basically takes the bus. A car is so expensive there. Very few, like not very few people, but a lot of people will just rely on the public transportation. It works really well there. A lot of the people there just have normal jobs like you'd have here in the US. There aren't very many. Oil's a huge deal there. So a lot of people will work with the oil companies. Shopping in Norway, every city has a center, like a midpoint, where it's basically like you just walk the streets. They're like too narrow for cars to get in, and so you have to park on like the outsides of it. But it's like a shopping area where there's just like food stores and shopping, like clothes stores, and you just kind of walk through, and all of them are like really pretty. But everything is super expensive there. Everything will be about 5 times more expensive there than it is here, just because the cost of living is so much higher there. People are all super nice. They're all, in general, like amazing people. They are so nice. The main church there is Lutheran church. They call it the state church, but there's not a whole lot of really active people in it. Like they're all members of it, but they don't necessarily go every week or anything like that. They'll get their kids baptized and when they're born and confirmed when they're 14, or I think it's 14. But not super active in that. But like every person in the country is basically born into the church, the Lutheran church there. People there are really, like I said, they're so nice. They are outgoing, helpful. Like anytime like I needed help with the language and I asked someone there, they'll immediately help me. Virtually everyone under the age of probably 60 speaks fluent English. Ask anyone and they'll be able to help. That's a great part. Culturally, they take English from their about first grade until they're done and in high school, and all their TV and movies are not dubbed at all. It's all in English, and they just have subtitles. So everyone is really good at English. Etiquette tips, like the only one I can really think of right now is when you get done eating, you have to say "Takk for maten." It's thank you for the food. It's considered really rude if you don't say it, and they eat with a fork and knife for everything. You always have to have a fork and knife in your hand, and that's considered proper. So it's not like America where you just cut everything with the side of your fork. You cut it with the knife and have them both in your hands the whole time, and that's considered polite. But at the end, if you don't say "Takk for maten," you're considered pretty rude. For holidays, Christmas is a huge deal over there. Basically, until like 2 days before Christmas until New Year's, everything closes and stays closed. You just like spend time with your family and eat and open presents, and it's considered like this great time. They open like the grocery stores one day in the middle of that week, so everyone has to go and get their food for the next couple days, and you have to stock up before and then stock up in that mid-week opening. But none of the stores are open. Nothing's open. Every Sunday, actually, all year round, everything's closed. Like nothing's open on Sundays in Norway. Norwegians, because they get paid more and they get a lot more vacation time, the summer they will go on a vacation for a month or two. Like in the middle of summer, they just go, everyone goes on these 2-month vacations in the summer, and they call it feria. They just go on vacation for months at a time. For weird things I ate, they have a traditional Christmas dish called lutefisk, and it's like a fish that's cooked in, like you let it sit and ferment for a while and it gets like jello-y, and then you put it in the oven. And so like when you like touch it, it like jiggles back and forth like Jello, and I thought it was disgusting. I couldn't eat a whole lot of it, but they put like bacon on it, and it makes it a little better. But it's super salty and just not a texture that I like. And I love fish, so it was weird that I wouldn't like that. But I don't think many. I think it was a traditional dish back when, because not a whole lot of Norwegians eat it today. Another weird thing, I ate whale one time, a whale steak, and reindeer. Reindeer was really good. The whale was a little weird. It was bloody. It was really bloody when they cooked it. It was kind of gross watching them cook it. They have these little kebab stands. It's like a Middle Eastern food that they have, like it's kind of like their version of fast food, and you eat it like in a pita bread. It's not Norwegian at all, but they're just everywhere, and all the Norwegians eat it. It's like a lamb in a pita, and you eat it with a fork and a bunch of vegetables in it and some sauce that I have no idea what's in the sauce, but it was good. Desserts, they have really good desserts. My favorite it's called riskrem. It's like a rice cream with they put like a strawberry sauce over it, and so it's like rice and a lot of whipped cream basically. And I thought it was my favorite. They have a lot of cakes and things there. Around Christmas they have a lot of like specialty cakes that you eat. Christmas is a huge deal there. Drinks, they mostly, like every family you'll eat with they call it soft. It's just basically a concentrate of like something really thick, and you have it on the table, and they have water, and you just pour a little bit of the soft into the drink and then put water for the rest. And like comes in every flavor ever, but that's usually what every family drinks. It's kind of like a juice type thing. There's a lot of fish, obviously, because it's right there on the ocean. You eat a lot of fish. The best thing, my favorite dish it's called a kjøttkaker. It's like a big meatball. If you've ever been to IKEA, like they have the small like Swedish meatballs, but in Norway they eat them a lot bigger. And you have potatoes, and you eat like a berry sauce. It's called tyttebær. And you mix it all together and eat it. And that's my favorite. It's just got like onions and meat, and it's really good. But you eat a lot of fish there. Those are kind of the main traditional dishes that you'll get everywhere. But you'll have all like the American pizza and French fries and hamburgers. They eat that all over there also. Norway is one of like the top 5 safest countries in the world. It's very like you never feel like you are going to get harmed or anything like that. Like we lived in what was considered the bad part of town, but it wasn't like, it was nice. Like it would not have been considered like a rough part over in the US. Like it was really nice. So you're safe. The only like in the winter it gets dark really early, so it gets dark sometimes like 1 or 2 in the afternoon. Like the sun goes down, so you feel like it's dark and like shouldn't be safe. But I never, like once you've been there for a little while, you're never worried about your safety. Everyone is super polite. You don't have to worry about any like getting mugged at gunpoint or anything like that, because there's no guns anywhere. The cops don't even carry around guns. For safety, it's a great place. So any mother would never have to worry about their kid over there. I never had anything, no dangerous experiences at all. Like I never even felt like I was in a dangerous situation. Weather in Norway, it's relatively cold. I was always in the south of Norway, so it didn't get like as bad as in the north. I have like negative 20, negative 30 degree weather. You bundle up and it's really not that bad. But in the summer it's really nice because it only gets about probably 80 degrees at the highest. It rains pretty much every day in the summer, which is nice. It'll cool down, so it never gets like way hot. It'll just rain for like 10 minutes at a time. One of the coolest things about Norway is in the summer, when you go to bed at night, it still looks like it's about 5 o'clock in the evening, and when you wake up in the morning, it looks like it's noon, because the sun just kind of goes all the way around you because it's so far north But the bad part is in the winter, it's the exact opposite, where sometimes you only get 3-4 hours of sunlight, where you, at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it's dark and you are thinking it's 9 or 10 at night. But the weather is nice. The summers are awesome there. It's so pretty and nice, and there's wild berries that grow just everywhere that are good to eat, and the water's all super clean that you can drink anywhere, so you don't have to worry about that. The berries you can just pick up right off the side of the road and eat, and they're good. They're just fine. Strawberries, blackberries, blueberries, raspberries, they're just everywhere over there. I've heard of the snow being so high, like higher than the cars on the side of the roads up further north. I never got to actually see that. And in the north, the northern lights you get to see like every night up there. I never got to see them because they never started more than like a day up further north. But like they say, every night basically it's just greens and pinks and everything just moving across the sky, and you're just like walking around in it, and it's amazing. But as for extreme weather, I got caught in some rainstorms and everything like that, where I would get home from being out and I would just be completely wet. My clothes wouldn't dry for a couple days. The language in itself is, to get like the words and everything like that, it's Germanic language, so it's not super hard, but the pronunciation and to sound like you're from the area is so hard, because it goes up and down, and it's a very sing-songy language, and American or my English is just flat and monotone basically, but there's like every word you have to go up and down and pronounce it in a different tone and everything like that, so it's super hard to sound like you're from there. For me at least it was, but to get like the words and like the correct grammar isn't terribly hard. Just a cool thing about the language, each town you go to will have a completely different dialect. So sometimes it'll be like learning not a completely new language, but a completely like different dialect. Like the word for I in Oslo is jeg, and the word for I in Stavanger is egg. And basically every word will end differently and pronounce differently. Like in Stavanger they're very hard on their R's. They'll ach, and in Oslo they'll ar. So it's like the whole, like I had been there in Norway for a year and I was getting real confident thinking I knew the language, and then I got moved over there and I had a junior companion and he had to translate for me, because at first I had no idea what was going on. Like I couldn't understand a thing for the first like week I was there, and then I started to pick it up that there was just subtle changes in the words. To say bye, you say hadde. Like you usually say like bye, have a good one, ha det bra. Bra is good. Hadde is just like have it, is what it directly translates to, but that's how they say bye. So like to say how's it going, there's a bunch of different ways, but the most common one is hvordan går det? Where's the bathroom? Hvor toiletten? Toilette, not toiletten. It's just, you never say bathroom, you say toilet. They think that's weird if you say bathroom. Bathroom's baderom.
They're very laid back. So one of the stigmas in Norwegian culture is if you talk to somebody that you don't know on the street, they look at you like you have 3 eyes. They get really uncomfortable talking about their religious beliefs, especially if they don't know you. They also really love their coffee. It's another thing that we run into, is that Scandinavians in general drink more coffee than the majority of the world. There's a coffee shop on every corner, it seems like. They love Christmas. Christmas is celebrated for, like, it seems like a month. The whole month of December and even January, they're still stuck in their Christmas mood. And that's something I really enjoyed, that Christmas is really focused on. Even if it's not, centered on Christ, they still love the Christmas spirit, which was really, really nice. They are very proud of the fact that they invented skiing. And so if you're a Norwegian and you don't at least know how to ski, you're a black sheep. So they'll always go, and on the weekends or even during the day, they'll go and ski or cross-country skiing, not even downhill. Just being on those skis in the snow is something that every Norwegian has ingrained in their blood, it seems like. They love to travel. They really have an appreciation for the whole world to travel in, and they have the money to travel, and so they utilize that. And that's something I wish I had more opportunity to do. A lot of the older generation of Norwegians, especially the older women, they would always love that we were respectful. Because, I don't know if this is just the older view, but they feel like the younger generation is kind of becoming disrespectful. And so there would be so many old women who would come up to us and be like, oh, I wish all of our youth were like you guys. And so if you're just respectful, a lot of the older generation of Norwegians really appreciate that. Because they feel like that's something that's kind of been lost. It seems like every week there's some other kind of tradition or holiday that they have. And so they find any opportunity they can to get off work and to just have a party, or some kind of get-together. Whether it be, the second day before Easter or just some random day that they celebrate for school graduation or anything they can find just to be with their families and with their friends is something that they really value. And one of the things I treasure most about going to Norway was the relationships that you make. I mentioned before about how Norwegians have that wall, and it's kind of hard to break down the wall. But once you break down that wall, there'll be your friend for life. And there's one lady in particular who, it was in my very first area, and she was our landlord, and we lived in her basement. And she would invite us up every night after we were planning to come in, have cake or give us some soda or things like that. And we'd go up there almost every other night after planning just to talk to her. And it was her and her husband, and I think they were probably in their 60s. And so after 4 months of visiting her 3 or 4 times a week at nighttime, she quickly became, as she likes to call it, my Norwegian mom. And I treasure that relationship just because she's about as Norwegian as they come, and you can just feel how she treasures the relationship. And she's not the abnormal Norwegian. Every Norwegian is like that, where once you get on their good side and they trust you enough, and they'll do anything for you. And that's something that I really liked about Norway, is that the friendships are really important to each and every one of them. Staple foods in Norway are fish and potatoes. So if you don't like fish when you're going to Norway, you'll like it when you leave. They have the best fish in the world. It's fresh, it's delicious, and you'll learn to love it. So for every meal, they'll have either fish or some kind of meat, like beef or chicken, but there's always potatoes and vegetables, and they always put some kind of sauce on it. So a lot of people would say that Norwegian food is bland, but I feel like they're just they don't have as many strong spices there. So I had one Norwegian try and explain to me that they thought ketchup was spicy. So that kind of gives you an insight of how they view their food. It's very mild, but it fills you up, and it's delicious. So they have lots of different kinds of traditional food for Christmas. A lot of lamb, like salted lamb or pork that's roasted, or the infamous lutefisk. It's fish that's soaked in a poison, lye, and then they dry it out and cook it. And it's disgusting, but it's something that all Norwegian people love, whether they like it, the taste, or not. So it's something that they're really traditional with their food. So some foods they'll say, no, we don't eat that until Christmas, and they'll stick to that. They eat a lot of soup, because it gets kind of cold there, and there's nothing better to warm yourself than soup. Staple food is fish and potatoes. I had more potatoes on my mission than I'll ever care to admit. But there's worse things to eat than potatoes. So obviously the winter, you have to be prepared for anything, because it's going to be freezing. And so Norwegians, they adapt very easily to the seasons without even thinking twice about it. So in the fall, it'll be raining. It's usually raining in the fall, or on a very, very, rare day, it'll be sunny. But it's beautiful. And so you always have to be prepared to have a jacket in your backpack, because it may start raining or it may start snowing. So you always have to be prepared to add layers while you're out. And you'll just see Norwegians just grab random things out of their bag and just start layering up in the middle of the day, just because they realize that the weather could change at any moment. Transportation is something that I really miss. In Norway, you don't necessarily need a car at all. You can use public transportation or even walk anywhere you want. And so in one of my cities, Bergen, we lived closer to the chapel, which was outside of the city a little bit. But it wasn't a problem because we could walk to the tram or the train and take the train into the city every day, and it takes like 10-15 minutes. The buses go anywhere. You have a bus map, and you can figure out where you want to go, and the buses are very easy to find, and hardly ever got lost in Norway. So public transportation is something that's very, very efficient, and it's something I wish we had in America, because it'd save a lot of money instead of driving around in your car. The standard of living is very high in Norway. I never lived in any apartment where I felt like I was living really poorly. It was always something that I was like, okay, we're always taken care of in Norway. The government takes care of its citizens. Even if you're poor, they always will give you somewhere to be with a roof over your head, which is really, really nice. But if you have money in Norway, your houses are phenomenal. They may not be as big as in America, but they're just nice. They have nice things. So that's also something I like, is that they don't necessarily go out of their way to have something big. Instead of, going bigger, they just go nice. Have nice things instead of, like America, they always make fun of us for having everything that's supersized. It's a beautiful country. I've never been in a modern city in Norway that's dirty. Norwegians respect their cities, and they always go out of their way to pick up trash that they see on the ground. And so you'd be walking around, and it's amazing to think how many people are in the city at one time, and it's practically spotless, which was really nice to see. It seems really intimidating because it's closer to Finland, the country is, and everyone hears about how hard Finnish is. So when I got my call to Norway, everyone was saying, you're going to have such a hard time learning that language. But in reality, I didn't feel like it was that difficult. Obviously, learning a new language is hard no matter what language it is, but there's a lot of similarities to English, and it's a Germanic language. And so if you have any connections to German, learning Norwegian won't be as difficult. The grammar is different than English, but it's not as difficult as you may think. It's very simple. There's very few rules, but the one rule, or the few rules that they do have, are pretty easy to mess up. And so as long as you focus on learning those basic rules, then the grammar is not that hard. The hardest thing about learning Norwegian is the pronunciation. It's very easy to speak grammatically perfect Norwegian, but sound 100% like an American. So they'll understand you, but they'll know right off the bat that you're an American, and that's something that most Norwegian missionaries, especially that are American, get frustrated with, because we all want to master the language, but getting those pronunciations things down is really hard. And one of the reasons for that is that there are so many dialects in Norwegian that they just tweak the pronunciation just a little bit, that it's hard to master one set of Norwegian dialect. But that's one of my favorite things about the Norwegian language, is the dialects, because depending on how someone speaks, you can understand and determine where they're from. So the west coast of Norway, you can hear a lot of like the guttural, like scarring of the R's, and then in Oslo they roll the R's. That's kind of the general thing, where you can tell at least what part of Norway they're from, and that was really interesting to see. And it's fun because we can all understand each other. It's not different enough where it's a new language, but it's just different enough to make it unique. And I thought that was really fun. Ok, til alle de norske vil bare si at jeg savner dere masse. Jeg tenker på dere hver dag. Men jeg ser opp til dere. Det er vanskelig å være en nordmann som en mormon. Men jeg vil bare si at jeg er takknemlig for det som dere har gitt meg, de opplevelser og de velsignelser som dere har gitt meg. Jeg setter veldig mye pris på det dere har gjort for meg. Og jeg ber for dere ofte. Og jeg vil bare vise min takknemlighet for medlemmer i Norge. Dere er så fantastiske, og det er klart at det er vanskelig å holde norsken i USA, men jeg prøver. Jeg vil tilbake til Norge en dag, og jeg vet at denne kirken er sann, og at Jesus Kristus er ved siden av enhver av oss. Det er en ting som jeg tenker på ofte.